Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and if you've been following this channel, you know that at one time, way back 45 years or so ago, I was the senior flight examiner out at the Air Force Flight Test Center. Yes, this historic sign that I think is now in a museum, that was our sign as you came on to Edwards Air Force Base. It's the sign you see in the right stuff and stuff like that. But anyway, I was a senior flight examiner in T-38s out there, and I gave check rides most all of the time to test pilots and astronauts. I had a few other guys I gave check rides to, and I talk about in another video about a major who was, I actually gave him instruction, not check ride, and he was rather interesting. But this is a tale about a captain out there, a new test pilot that did not perform as I expected. Now that's me standing next to the T-38. I was a senior flight examiner, like I mentioned, and so I would give a little bit of instruction. Most of the time I spent giving check rides. And if you were a new test pilot, you were assigned to test ops, and you waited in test ops basically until somebody picked you up, like the F-15, the F-16, the A-10 group, and you went and you worked on a test mission. But in test ops, it was kind of just a holding place, and that's where you sat. And this one captain, I'll call him Captain D, he was in test ops, fairly new guy, and he's assigned to go with me on a check ride. And of course, there you can see a much younger person way way back then. Now, T-38, it is a fairly simple aircraft, relatively easy to fly. Although I recently heard people say it's harder to fly because it's not as sophisticated as the new aircraft. But anyway, here is the T-38 cockpit. I'm sitting in the back. He's in the front. He's doing first pilot duties. Now, the T-38 is a single pilot aircraft. You don't need a co-pilot. You don't need other crew members. You fly the aircraft single pilot. So it's one guy who does everything. Of course, this is well before I got in the airlines and even have any concept of crew, crew coordination, because I've never flown an aircraft that had a crew in it other than, an instructor, and that wasn't quite what you call a crew as such. We didn't function as crews because you had to function as first pilot. That's how you're being graded. But anyway, okay. So you're responsible for the full operation of the aircraft, the full flight of it. You don't have a guy that you're depending on, and you're certainly not depending on, as such, the examiner to help you with the check ride. Okay, so that's the engine instrument cluster. Now we got two engines, and the engine instruments are the heart of monitoring the airplane. They tell you the health of the engines, and that's very important. Now, anybody who's been in training command knows that you've got operating limitations for the engine. You've got them in start, idle, military, and afterburner. You've got certain fuel flow things you should see, and the reason fuel flow is dashed out in afterburner there is because we don't read afterburner fuel flow. Some aircraft do now, and that's a number that can scare the heck out of you because it can be pretty huge, like on the F-15. It's pretty amazing. But anyway, it's probably good you don't see the afterburner fuel flow because it would tell you got in the T-38 11 minutes of fuel before you're empty. So it'd be kind of scary. But anyway, I digress. Here we are. You've got various parameters. So you start the engine, and you should have certain engine indications. And anybody who flies the T-38 knows what to expect, what they're looking for, what they should see. So we go out there. I'm giving the check ride in the back seat, and he starts the engines. And the right engine, the fuel flow is at 0. And I'm thinking, okay, well, he should have noticed that on start because that's an important thing to start. One of the indications of a hot start can be if you have very high fuel flow. Well, he missed it. Okay, well, how long is this going to go? So we taxi out. Okay, we go through the last chance where they check the aircraft out. We're still sitting there at 0 fuel flow. And I'm thinking, this guy isn't paying attention to the aircraft. And, like I said, Edwards is an easygoing place, but come on, guy. You got to fly the airplane. You got to be aware of your surroundings. You got to know what's going on, and to not be aware of the health of the engine. What if the EGT was over limits? Could I count on him noticing that because he didn't notice the fuel flow, which is right there in his face? So we get cleared for takeoff. We start going. He puts it into afterburner, and I tell him to abort. And he goes, what? And I said, we've had 0 fuel flow since start. I said, that's not very impressive. Let's go back and get another aircraft, and we'll continue with this check ride. Now, for some, that would have been a point to bust him right there, and I'm sure in the training command, that would have been it. But this is Edwards. Things are a little bit looser. I was going to give him a second chance. So we get a new aircraft, and we go out and fly. Okay, the flying portion isn't going too badly. He's doing good as a pilot in general, but this was an instrument check ride. And the T-38 is a very fast, high-performance aircraft. 1 degree pitch change on the approach will give you 900 feet per minute rate of change. So the aircraft is very sensitive in pitch. And at the time, George Air Force Base was open, so we go on over to George, and we're going to shoot an instrument approach. And so we get clearance for the instrument approach, and he gets from the ATC, he gets a missed approach procedures. You all know you virtually never fly the published missed approach, because a lot of times that will cause a lot of conflicts with the rest of the pattern and stuff like that. It's only there so there is a listed missed approach in case you have radio out, things like that. So they give him missed approach instructions, heading, altitude, things like this. Fairly simple, but he's supposed to write it down. Okay, we do the approach, and he goes missed approach. And he starts flying the missed approach, and he goes, what heading and altitude do we want? And I go, well, you're supposed to write that down. I said, I'm not your co-pilot here. This is single ship. You're supposed to be able to fly this. He did not know the missed approach instructions. He had written them down. And I go, okay. Well, we conclude the check ride. And this is a little bit of a head scratcher for me, because it was the first time that I had seen such a lackadaisical performance of somebody that I thought was a fairly highly qualified, or should be a fairly highly qualified pilot. So I go back and I bring him in, and I say to the test ops squadron commander, I said, I want to do this debriefing in front of you. So I went through and I debriefed it, and I said, I got two choices here. I said, I can fail you on the ride, and I think I have adequate reasons to fail you on the ride, and of course I know how humiliating that is, especially for a new guy. But I want the squadron commander to be aware of your substandard performance, and I expect that you could fly the aircraft better. What you did was just minor details of not paying attention to the gauges and not copying down missed approach instructions. And I said, we could go up and fly another 10 flights, but that it wasn't your flying ability, it was your mental ability. And I said, so I'm going to pass you with a Q2, which means you qualify, but it's not the Q1. Everybody gets a Q1. But I said, you need to tighten up your act. And for me, who was a fairly new guy, a non-test pilot, to kind of read this guy the riot act was not that easy for me, because I respected these test pilots, and frankly I was a little shocked at his lackadaisical attitude. Well, his career kind of got into a few problems. He also was checked out in the UH-1N. And the thing about Edwards is you can do a lot of stuff. You can do a lot of stuff that you could get in trouble for, flying maybe low and fast where you shouldn't necessarily be flying low and fast. And I got a few stories about that. But the basic thing was, if you didn't get caught, you were okay. If you got caught, you were in big trouble. Well, he was out flying low across the desert, and you see those telephone wires in the, or actually those power lines in the back there. He didn't hit power lines, but he hit a telephone line that was stretched out there. And fortunately, he didn't crash. He broke out every single window in the helicopter by hitting that wire. Nobody was hurt. The helicopter was damaged. He came back, and of course now he is not in a good position with anybody. So, of course, he was never really my friend after that. We weren't necessarily friends before, but I don't know what actually happened to his career. I don't know if he recovered, but he sure didn't have a good start. And that's my story about Captain Mike D. Really the only test pilot that I gave a check ride to that I had trouble with having a lackadaisical attitude. Most test pilots are, I mean, they are by the book. They are, it's not the cowboy days in the olden times. It's by the book. Most test pilots can be actually extremely boring because they're so factual, by the book, and step by step by step, and methodical. You got to be methodical or you can end up in trouble, dying, and stuff like that. Anyway, that's the story. I hope you found it interesting. Thanks for watching.